I'd like to invite up onto stage Jim Frogatt, who is a retired Football Licensing Authority inspector and was co-author of the UK Accessible Stadia Guide here in the UK. I'd also like to invite Cathy Longback on stage, who's kindly offered to stand in. Unfortunately, Alan is not able to be with us today, so Cathy's agreed to come up as well. And what I hope now is we can have a really lively discussion about maybe the situation at your club and how some of these things have been achieved, and really leave the conference with our eyes and our minds open to what we actually can do rather than what we can't do. So if I may, if there are any questions from the floor, there's hands up already. Where are the ladies with the microphones? Are they? Ah, wonderful. Can we start with Stoyan? That would be great. Thank you.
I had a great privilege of meeting Keith a few years ago when I was with Arsenal. When I was with Arsenal at the ground, and that what impressed me most is not just facilities, but when you have the right people to implement those facilities. And I remember those days I had a dodgy power chair, and in a half-time I recharged in the offices over there, and I was hugely impressed. And that's what I think is important. I was hoping Alan's going to make it here today, because I had many problems when Arsenal moved from Highbury to new facility, when the computers show wheelchair space is taken, and when there was never a problem at Highbury, and then when the computers show wheelchair, I don't mind coming in a half-time, but doesn't matter what kind of stadium facilities you have, when you have the right people implementing those facilities, that's the most important, and people can always adjust. And I just want to compliment Keith again. I have a great photo from that visit over there, and I just was hugely impressed by the service there. And I think it's more important that the right people know those things, and you can always adjust no matter what kind of seating arrangements or whatever it is there. So glad I made it on time to see you. All right, bye.
Thank you, Stoyan.
Thank you very much for those comments. Can I just say that you didn't give me 10 pence for the electric meter after I charged that up?
When you come to Premiership, then I'll do that.
We've got a question from the gentleman here from Choice.
Hi, my name is Manoj. Thank you. This question for Tom, and always disability accessibility is being looked at as ethical and moral responsibility of any organization. But as existing non-accessible stadia becoming accessible stadia, have you done ROI, and can you be able to share with that it will become important when we pressure other organizations to take as a business case for disability equality, please?
It's a great question, and we always ask that. I think what we sometimes find is that the ROI isn't as high a margin, or it may be longer to get to, but it doesn't mean it's not important. You know, the club has been here 127 years. You know, God willing, we'll be here another 127. So some of the more capital-intensive projects we do will just take a longer time to pay out. But it's interesting, the way that we get from 700 to 1,000 per game is not very costly at all. So it's really more of a people investment that we'll make in making sure that we can get the word out with the right people, because the facilities are already set to do it. But we certainly focus on that. Sometimes the ROI isn't as attractive as other parts of the business, but that's okay.
Can I just add to that, please? And that is just to make the point that yesterday we spoke very much about new stadia, new buildings, but existing stadia are equally as important. Why? Because they are not exempt from any guidance or legislation. Existing building, the requirements still apply. The situation is never static, and as we've seen at Derby, what was a new building 14 years ago very rapidly became an existing building. And I think that point about existing stadia are not exempt is, really needs to be made. In the UK, we have legislation which requires all building owners to undergo a continuing and evolving strategy in terms of provision for disabled people. And I think that obviously means that there has to be a continuing process for appraisal, for audit and implementation. And it's no good just saying it's an old building, it's existing, we can't do anything. There are excellent, capable designers around to actually undertake that task. And now, of course, there's Cathy in place, there's level playing field, there's excellent body available for consultation. And, you know, the fact that the guidance, UEFA guidance, was published yesterday, I think, was an incredible landmark experience for all of us. I've been involved in writing of legislation for probably 20 years now, but to actually see the culmination of UEFA and Cathy coming together to actually publish guidance that's going to be hugely significant in the whole of Europe, not just Europe, I'm sure it will very much spread very rapidly to the rest of the world and to other sports as well.
Raymond here, please.
Yeah, just to say, I said about the stadia stuff like that. A couple of days back, anyway, talking about Friday, I went to see Leeds play against Brighton or Albion anyway, and I just got to say that the ground there at Alex, I think it's called, and I was really impressed with the way that they did the ground and stuff like that, because it was right next door to the train station in it, and you know there's quite a lot of step-free access, get in and out of the ground and stuff like that. Said about it. I was really a passive fan, and I just gotta ask one of you. I don't know. How if in a lot of the clubs in the Football League should sort of follow take on board what Barton has done in a way, and how they're gonna improve about it. Edify.
It's probably a question for Cathy from Premier League, if that's okay, because Cathy's.
Yeah, I mean, I think it links very well with what Jim was just talking about, actually, in terms of the sort of documents that are out there, because all of the guidance is what has led to places like the Amex Stadium being so good. I was there last week as well, and I was really impressed with the stadium in a lot of ways. And I think what they've actually pulled off the trick there is of having an out-of-town stadium that doesn't feel soulless, which is actually really important. It sort of feels like a real place, and the atmosphere is fantastic. So it's great to hear that it was also a good experience for you as well. I think what we have to do are a number of things to make sure that everybody else sees how well that is working and tries to replicate it, whether it's with a new stadium or an existing one. One is through the sort of guidance that we produce, so that everybody is working towards the same standards, and anyone doing any rebuilding or new work is working to the same standards. But I think also for us it's literally about taking people on visits to those clubs and saying, look and see what they're doing here.
Absolutely.
See how well it works, and how can you find a solution here, because I think our access officers are really there to find solutions. And I think when people have talked about the staff being so good, it's because they meet people who want to find a solution for them on the day, and not see the issue as being a problem, who instantly say, right, we'll find a solution to that. So, I mean, after my visit to Brighton, I think, I'm really hoping they get promoted, actually, because then they'll be one of our clubs, which would be fantastic. But even if they don't, I think there's a trip to Brighton coming on for the Premier League access officers.
Thank you, Cathy. Got a question over here first.
Hi there, my name's Aubrey Bingham from Northern Ireland. Just like to comment about what was being said about Derby County there. Seem to be doing fantastic things. I'm absolutely amazed at the numbers of supporters with disabilities who are getting along to the matches. So well done. And it seems to me it's maybe the attitude is the thing there, very positive attitude of the management. Backing up the disability liaison officer. But my question is to do with the disability liaison officer. How does that actually work? Is that a paid role by Derby County, and would those DLOs be in place at other football clubs?
I'm happy to say that yes, Derby County do pay me for my endeavours, and one of my arguments, and I might put my foot in it here, is that a lot of clubs nominate DLOs, but the DLOs in some cases are people who are attached to the ticket office. Yet, right there, the point of contact, they can advise ticket locations, they can advise ticket prices, they can even advise car parking and where to go. The problem is that these people who are office bound do not get out on a match day to talk to the disabled. And listening to what Jim was saying when we were talking about we are in an existing stadium, we need to look at things. The way I can get around it is to go and ask the disabled what they continue to want. Where can we go from here? We've reached this stage. What's the next stage of development? And they are better, in many cases, to answer that rather than I. So therefore, I would suggest that the DLO should not be office bound and should be amongst those supporters on a match day.
Thank you. Thank you. Question? Oh, did you want to come in, Cathy?
I just
Sorry.
briefly wanted
Yeah.
to add to that, to say, I mean, I agree with Keith, and I think he's right about that's how a lot of the people at the clubs have initially got the role. And one of the reasons for us wanting to talk about them being access officers is because I think what we want to make sure is that they do have a role which is about all aspects of access across the football club and isn't just about ticketing requirements, and is broader. We've got a new training package that we're developing, and I hope that is one route to us, I suppose, giving them the opportunity to explain to the people that they're working with and for that they do have a much broader role and that they're not a ticketing assistant who speaks to disabled supporters.
Thank you, Cathy. There's a question here. Luke?
Hello. I am Johan ten Hove. I am from Groningen, Holland. I'm from FC Groningen. I'm chairman from the disabled people there, a large group, about 100 people. And I want to ask Tom, my English is not so well. I tried in English. Tom, pay the people who disable the same prices as the people who come normally to your stadium, or are there different? And the second, what I want to ask, how do you do it with the people who visitors, dus from the club who visit your club, and the people who come with you? Is that disparate? Is that in the same area as the people? We do it in Groningen. We have the people from outside and come with a visitor club. We put them together, not separate. We think that is better. Okay,
yeah, so
that's mine.
Johan, thank you. I'm going to take part, and I think Keith may want to take part as well. So our pricing for disabled is a concession price, which is historic. Ironically, we have some of our disabled season ticket holders who say, well, we should be paying the same full price. That being said, like anything else, once you any other segment of our business, a supporter who's used to a certain price, any price increase, especially during these times, is not necessarily welcome. So it is a concession price. I would certainly say that because the price is a bit more affordable than a regular season ticket, that must be helping our volume. But I think it's just a component of that. As it relates to our away supporters or fans coming from other clubs, it is a dedicated seating area with the away supporters. So everyone from yesterday it was Millwall. The next game will be Barnsley tomorrow night, and the disabled Barnsley supporters will be together with all of the other Barnsley supporters, which is important.
One thing that I get asked before a game by the disabled supporter, and it bears relevance as to whether they come, and they will say, am I going to be sat with my own supporter group, or am I going to be with the home supporter? And I will reply, yes, you're with your own supporters, you've got your own entrance, you've got your own facilities, rest assured you're okay. And they will very often say, fine, I'm going to come. Because there is this fear factor, and it's been proved over the years that disabled people who sit in the home end have been and are subject to abuse. The fact that they're disabled doesn't make any difference at all. So therefore, if you can get rid of that and get them seated together, then again it relieves a lot of pressure on those people who want to come along to football games.
I think I'd just like to interject, if I may, if you pardon me. As an organisation, we have a very firm view and policy, both for Cathy and for Level Playing Field in the UK, that we understand that there are lots of disabled people at the moment unable to find work and so on, and on lower incomes. We understand that fundamentally. But that should not base the reason for a concessionary ticket on being disabled. If a club chooses to give a concessionary ticket, our view is it should be based on other social factors such as low income, because disabled people aren't the only people on a low income. And in terms of providing facilities, disabled fans are the same as any other fan, and half the fun of going to an away game is to be with your own fans. As a fan personally, I dread going to games where you have to sit with the home fans. It's a completely different and often very miserable experience. So I really want to underline that. So there are clubs that give concessions to their disabled fans. Our view is there has to be a relationship between their disabled fans and the club. But if we're going to ask for equality, that comes with both sides of the coin, and I think we need to really address that. And in terms of our fellow fans, you know, provided the facilities are what they should be, then we should be treated in the same way as our other fellow fans. So that's the only thing I'd like to add. So I think there's another question here. Thank you.
My name's Alan Montgomery. I've just finished doing a degree course, part of which dealt with the recommendations and the guidances. My question is, what happens when if the clubs just say no?
So do you want the question repeated because we didn't have the mic? No. Could you just say, sorry, we didn't have the mic.
Oh, sorry.
No, we heard it.
Oh, you heard it, okay, thank you. Could you just repeat the question because
the question was about if there's all this guidance out there and advice, but what happens if the clubs ignore it and just say, no, we're not doing that? You've given us the advice, but thanks, but no thanks. I think any of us can take that one, I think.
Well, I'll have a very quick go, but I can only really speak about UK practice because legal situations in Europe might be slightly different, and I think this is where perhaps UEFA will have a very strong influence as well. But in UK, there are two bodies of legislation. Obviously, one is the building control process, which applies to all new buildings, and there's been a lot of new guidance produced, certainly in the last 10 years. Part M, access to buildings, has to be applied, and that makes a strong reference to accessible stadia. Again, guidance that was produced specifically. I'm having trouble with the same word again.
Specifically, I can say it now.
In respect to stadium design, and that was produced by the football authorities, along with NADS, as it was in those days, sitting around the table and addressing a very real problem. Those two specific problems were sightlines and numbers. And one of the great things is that UEFA guidance actually does include those two main issues, which will be wonderful. Now, so for a new building, certainly in the UK, there should be no question on those issues whatsoever.
Sorry, I was reading
existing stadium, right. Well, I think existing stadia, as I said earlier, are not exempt. Certainly in the UK, we have legislation under what used to be called Disability Discrimination Act. And whilst there is not an enforcing agency for the what was the DDA, there is certainly the possibility of test cases being taken. And you perhaps heard me say earlier, there is an ongoing an evolving duty. And therefore that means that the issue is never static. I think the process now of access audits is well known, and certainly I would anticipate an access audit being done on an annual basis, and as a result of that access audit, a development plan being put in place over a period of time. You know, we heard the word reasonable used earlier, and you know, everything has to be assessed on what is on a reasonable basis. But the benchmark is always going to be the guidance for a new building. And I think that whilst over a period of time you can easily measure whether there's any progress being made. I mean, what might be reasonable in year 1 will probably not then be reasonable in year 5 or year 10. And I think, you know, that's a very important principle that we mustn't forget. Existing stadia are not exempt.
Thank you, Jim. I think Cathy wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I mean, in a way, the short answer to it is simply that it depends what the problem is that you're seeking a solution to. Yeah. But ultimately, if a club says no and it's something they should be doing, then somebody will probably take them to court at some point. And there is the legal route that people take. And as I said earlier, we spend a lot of time just saying to clubs, do you think it's reasonable and do you fancy your chances in court? You know, when we get issues, when fans complain to us about a policy at a club, and that is what they have to consider. And usually my advice to our Premier League clubs, the size of the clubs, and whilst they might not be profit-making, everybody knows the resources that there are at our level of football. Do you fancy your chances in the court? Or is there something you can fix? You know,
Thank you.
Usually it's something they can fix when they do.
Thank you. We've got a question, I think, over this part of the room.
Hello, I'm Anders from Belgium, and I have a question about how to convince the business people to invest to make it more accessible for the people, because they think all the money is in the business seats, so they get everything, and we have to struggle and convince them to make adjustments, which they have done for us recently, 3 years ago, but it's not enough. And we have asked for make it more accessible also for other clubs who come to visit. And how do you convince the businessman to make some adjustments, because the income for the club is going up, but...
Thank you. I think probably Tom is best.
Yeah, I'll take that one on. I think events like this are an important first step, and you know, and perhaps it's more information sharing, good practice sharing amongst clubs, and getting to the top of any organization. You're right. The corporate hospitality seats are some of the highest yield seats, and it would be easy to focus on that in isolation and just make that the priority, or to make sponsorship, which is even higher yield, a priority. But the reality is we have a whole club to run, and we have supporters of all types at all price points. So if we pull back and we take a holistic view of the club, then we can look at those priorities differently. And in some cases, you could just say, well, the sponsorship and the corporate hospitality makes it that much easier to invest in other facilities. In our case, we can often make a business case for enhanced facilities for the disabled, which stacks up on its own. And that's where it's important to have someone like Keith, who is a champion internally, who is making it an important topic. So I would say all those things are important, but I'm eager to hear what other clubs are doing. We know what's working for us now, but there's probably 3 or 4 things that we're not yet doing that we could do better, and that's going to take clubs speaking to each other.
If I may just one more time interject, it never ceases to amaze us how many football clubs have so many empty seats on a match day, and yet if you're a disabled fan that needs specific access, you can't get into the ground. that has to be madness in terms of business, and I'm not a businesswoman, but it seems very simple math to me. Perhaps they need to make some adjustments and then they'll get a bit more business. And I think the really strong message here that all of my disabled fan colleagues would say, guess what? We come with family and friends. We don't come on our own. And if we don't come, you don't only lose our business, but you lose theirs too. So I think that's important. Are there any other questions from, we've got Monica over here.
I'm going to translate for Paweł Parus from Śląsk Wrocław.
Thank you.
We have a comment regarding what Joyce has said about financial support for fans with disabilities. Okay, so in Europe, Western Europe, the social security, social financial support to people with disabilities can be up to 150 euros, 100 or 150 euros. Okay, in Poland in Poland, the difference is that the social and financial support is incomparably lower, and giving a free entry to disabled supporters is an important motivation, and it's an important factor for them to actually get motivated to come to the stadium. Thanks to the fact that in Śląsk Wrocław Stadia the tickets are now free for people with disabilities. From 10 people with disabilities, fans with disabilities at the Stadia, now we have 100. We have approached local government and we have public funding to deliver an activization, social activization program for disabled fans, and this is what we're doing. And thanks to that, we can go to all away games for free, and our fans can go for free. And this is being funded by the national agency dedicated to activate and help to the people with disabilities.
Thank you. You make a very important point, but I think the essence of what we're saying is we recognise, and of course Poland is not alone in terms of the social support issues. But those social issues go beyond disabled people, and the point we really want to underline here is that there are other fans in the stadium that have the same social ills, for want of a better description. So by all means, those are really important, and Paul, we really respect the work you've done at Wrocław, and it's hugely important, but we'd like to see that same sort of concept be adopted for other fans that are, for whatever reason, socially embarrassed. So it is not a focus. It doesn't become, as we said yesterday, that disabled people continue to be seen differently. So we're not saying that what you're doing isn't wonderful, but it has to be in a wider context, not based just on disability. Thank you for that great point. Thank you. We've got another couple of questions, and I think then we need to close the session.
Hi, yeah, my name's Alan Campbell, and I'm a technical advisor with Sport Northern Ireland. I do apologise. I realise the common language of the conference is English, but in Northern Ireland we have our own version of English. I just wanted to make a point. It's actually in relation to a couple of questions back there. I personally don't feel that obviously the P factor and the S factor had been discussed yesterday, the lower of which dictates the capacity that the ground is capable of admitting. I personally don't feel that the P factor is reduced adequately at times when it comes to inclusive design. If the gangways or the the seats, the etc. aren't of adequate condition, or the risers or treads, etc. don't comply, the P factor would be reduced accordingly. But in relation to inclusive design, it's not always adequately reflected, and therefore there's no encouragement for the club or the particular club to improve on those particular points. Is that the case, or is that just a misobservation?
I'm just going to ask Jim to very, very briefly, in 2 words sort of thing, explain what PNS is for our sign language interpreters, because they're not managing to translate that. In very simple terms, Jim, not too technical.
The terms PNS factor were introduced in our guide safety at sports grounds about 15 years ago, and it was really an attempt to assist in the calculation of a safe capacity. P representing physical condition of a stadium, and S reflecting the quality of the safety management at that stadium. And it allows those 2 factors to be assessed, risk assessed, and included in a calculation for a safe capacity.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Does somebody want to take that question? It might be you, Jim, that takes that question. I'm not sure.
Perhaps, forgive me, I couldn't hear the detail of the question, but I think I'm right in understanding that your query was, why not include an assessment within P or S factors for that?
I personally don't feel that the physical factor, the P factor, i.e. the condition of the stadium, if the gangways or the risers and treads, etc., aren't adequate, or there's other sort of problems within the design, the P factor is reduced accordingly, and therefore the club they're not allowed to admit as many sort of people to the stadium as what potentially it could hold. I don't personally feel that the P factor takes enough consideration into the inclusive design side of the stadium, and therefore if the club is not penalised through that, there's no incentive for them to try and promote the inclusive design within the stadium.
I think it's a very fair point that you're making, and in fact the FLA made it quite clear when it produced the Guide Safety of Sports Grounds for government. The assessment of PNS factors is not a precise science. It's very much an indicative means of making or assisting in the risk assessment process. And it lists a number of factors that should or should not be taken into account. But those factors are not exclusive. And I think any factor in discussion with the club, the local authority, local police, fire service or whatever, or perhaps even the local access group, should be properly taken into consideration. So I think it's a fair point that you're making.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've had lots of chance for a lot of very interesting questions. I've got one last question. Can you tell me how much it costs to put an elevated wheelchair platform in an existing stadium? Because I think some people in this room will be quite pleasantly surprised.
2007 was the last platform that we put in, and the cost factor for the lift was 7,500, and that included all the electrics. The additional payment was for the metal, as I said on the film. The base of the elevated platform, you use the existing concrete stands. So that cost is really negligible. And again, it really can be brought down by negotiations with local companies who would maybe be prepared to sponsor that stand. So I would suggest £10,000 and you have an elevated platform for potentially 10 wheelchairs.
Thank you. So I think the final message there, for about 10 or 11,000 euros, your club could put a wheelchair platform probably in your stadium, at least one and probably more, for what is really reflectively, when we compare, and I'm going to say it, how much our players are paid a very, very small sum of money. So I think there's a challenge there somewhere. So thank you very much to all our speakers. It's been wonderful. It's been a great session. Thank you very much indeed.